Okay, today is the day. I am so excited. I am going to be answering all of those fun questions that I get from you guys as readers when I see you here on YouTube, when I see you at conferences, and certainly in my inbox. So this is going to be a fun, very informal video, different from my others, but I'm really excited to answer those questions that you have for me about Are You My Cousin? And well, about my own research. Hey, if we haven't met before, I am Lisa with Are You My Cousin? And the YouTube channel here is designed to help you find your ancestors, grow your family tree, but not get overwhelmed in the process. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, you are in the right place. The first question I'm going to answer is one I get frequently, and that is, how did I get started in genealogy research? Well, I think compared to a lot of you guys, I'm probably a newbie in the genealogy research field. I started when my children were younger, and it really started quite naturally. We had had dinner with friends, and the conversation had just carried on and naturally got into talking about where we were from as individuals. Many of us were from North Carolina, and so we were comparing notes about where we grew up. Didn't think too much about that whole genealogy thing going forward, kind of in the back of my mind. And then within a couple days, my children, who were quite young, they were elementary school at the time, said, "Mom, we want to Google ourselves." I know, this was early in the Google days, guys, but they wanted to Google themselves. And so it was August, and it's very hot here in August. In fact, it is too hot to even go to the swimming pool in August around here. So we spent the afternoon, well, Googling themselves. And that naturally led into looking at our surnames and finding ancestors, or not ancestors, but finding other cousins online. And one thing led to another, and next thing I knew, I had quite gone down that rabbit hole of genealogy research. Now, my kids definitely kind of faded away on that search, but I kept going, obviously. And they would come back every now and then and go, "Mom, did you discover anything new? Did you find out, are we related to somebody famous?" No, we're not really at this point. But, who could we go see, or who do we know, or tell me that story about what grandma told you about growing up. So we started getting those questions answered and started really having conversations that maybe we wouldn't have had otherwise. So that is sort of how I got started in genealogy research. Again, I'm kind of a late comer to genealogy research compared to many of you, but definitely I'm loving it, as you can see, and it was quite accidental. Another question that I get is, where do I keep my own personal family trees? So where do I document my family trees? And that's an excellent question. And I actually do it in two places. Well, I do it in more than two, but I have online version and an offline version. So offline, I use the Family Tree Maker software. Now, there are many great softwares out there for family trees. There's Roots Magic, there's Legacy, and all of them do pretty much the same thing. I've just started with I started with Family Tree Maker years ago and just stuck with it. I like it, it works for me, and really didn't see a need to change. So the important thing here, though, that I would like to tell you is that you need to have one that's offline, that's yours. So, and certainly backing it up. I do back that up regular basis. Now, the other thing is, I do have my family trees online. I have one in, honestly, all of the major genealogy databases. I have one at Ancestry, MyHeritage, Find My Past, as well as I'm on Family Search. Now, do you need to have them at all of these places? No, but I do this pretty much every day as part of a business, so I definitely need to have it in all those places, but I do want to have one online that syncs with my offline research so that I can research in both places, from both places. So for me, it works well to have them across all of those databases. The other reason that, if possible, if you can have trees at all of them, is that I don't want to miss clues. Each of the sites generates clues or hints. As you know, Ancestry has the shaky leaves. MyHeritage has smart or has discoveries that they email you. Well, each of them has their own algorithm for helping you suggest hints. And I don't want to miss hints or miss possibly matching to somebody else on their databases simply because I'm on a different database only. And this allows me to kind of use all of the databases, all of their hints, all of their algorithms, as well as possibly match with maybe other people who are researching the same trees but are only on one platform. So that is why I have it. But at minimum, I would have, when I started, I had the offline tree at Family Tree Maker, and then I had an online tree. So that's the minimum that I started with. Now, if you like learning about genealogy resources and records and how to find tips and tricks to find your ancestors, be sure and hit that subscribe button in the bottom right-hand corner. That way you'll be notified when I post brand new videos here weekly on the Are You My Cousin YouTube channel. Now, some people have asked me, do I have a favorite ancestor? And well, I'm not sure we're supposed to have a favorite ancestor. Like, we're not supposed to have our favorite child, right? I do have two favorite ancestors though. Now, number one, the first one is, his name was James Harwood, sometimes known as James Howard. Now, you guys may have heard me talk about James in past videos and over on the website. And the reason is he's one of my favorite is because he's really one of the first ancestors that I did really in-depth research in. And I was very fortunate because he had a lot of records that were actually not so hard to find. I was researching in Wake County, North Carolina. We didn't have any record losses there. And well, he pretty much stayed. Once he came here as a young man, or actually as a child, he stayed and he didn't go anywhere else. So I was really fortunate, and that I think really helped to fuel my genealogy research excitement and keep me in it, because I was able to hit those early successes. So he's one of my favorite ones. I was one of the first ones to really document him completely. Other people had documented him in their trees, but I was able to dig more of the stories out on him. So he's my favorite ancestor. One of my other favorite ancestor is actually one of my brick wall ancestors. You guys have probably heard me talk about Joanna Barrett in previous videos, as well as blog posts, or even if you've heard me speaking. Joanna is one of my favorites, not because she's easy to find, but because she is so hard to document and so hard to find. I have her documented well back to a certain point, and beyond that, I can't figure out why this Irish woman is in the foothills of North Carolina at this particular time period, because there is no one else there who was born in Ireland. I can't figure out why she got there. And so she is one of my favorites because she represents such a big challenge for me. And every now and then, I might get a hint, I might get a clue or a glimpse of what she might have done, or a little bit more of her story. So I just keep chipping away at her and chipping away at that brick wall. But she is just one of my favorite ancestors because she is such a mystery to me. Now, another question I get, and that's because I probably talk so much about Southern research, as well as my Southern accent that I have, is, where am I from? Well, guys, I grew up in North Carolina. I still live in North Carolina. And so this is very much a North Carolinian accent. And my ancestors were pretty much Virginia and North Carolina. We didn't get very far, quite frankly. So that's where I'm from. My ancestors, as I said, are mostly from Virginia and North Carolina, and further back, mostly from the British Isles. Okay, now I got asked recently, what is the biggest genealogy mistake that I have made and that I make? And I thought about this one. Yeah, I've definitely made mistakes along the way. And I realized, I think one of the biggest mistakes that I make as a genealogy researcher is, well, maybe going too fast, particularly early on as a new researcher. I got into the records. I was successful with finding ancestors and finding records, going through those census records and kind of clipping right along, going, every 10 years, kind of matching those ancestors back particularly when they stayed in that same area. And so I think as a result, I didn't necessarily get everything I needed out of those census records or their other records. I just documented that family, and I was able to go back another generation, another 10 years, another generation, and I kept going. And so I think that one of the biggest mistakes that I found is that, in hindsight, I was too fast in those records. I get too fast, not just in the census records, to be honest, but in a lot of those records I was in early in my research, including, say, reading wills, evaluating estate records, those things. I went too fast and didn't think about the implications of what that document was telling me beyond that point in time? What was it telling me about my ancestors' family and community on a little bit wider scale? So I would say that the biggest mistake that I've made and that took me a while to correct really was going too fast and not fully understanding everything a document had to tell me. Now, I did have one more big mistake that I made early on in my genealogy research, and I think maybe it's because I didn't quite realize how deep into research I was going to get, and that is I was a bit sloppy in naming my files. So when I would download documents or scan documents into my computer, I did not always label them consistently. And that was a problem early on. Now, I've since corrected much of that, but it took me a while to go back and correct. And sometimes I would lose things, in somewhere in my computer or in my files because I wasn't consistent in how I labeled the information that I have. So now I just created my own system for myself, and I know exactly when I download a file, how I am going to label that file so that I can then search for it in my computer more easily. Now, I do get asked, do I still have genealogy brick walls in my own family tree? And the answer is yes, 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 I have brick walls in my family tree. Definitely Joanna Barrett that I mentioned earlier is probably one of my toughest that I have. She is an Irish Irish third great grandmother, and she is definitely a difficult one for me to figure out. But I have hope and hope that I'll be able to do that eventually one day. I do recognize that not every brick wall is going to be solvable, but I really have high hopes that this one will be. I have other brick walls too, particularly some of the deeper lines that go back into the colonial Virginia time period. Many of the records were destroyed that I needed, and so that just makes it a little bit tougher, certainly, to solve. But again, once again, I have my fingers crossed and hopes that I will keep plugging away at it and chipping away at that brick wall and find more and more clues. You never quite know where something is going to come up and where you're going to get a spark of inspiration for that genealogy brick wall. I don't know any genealogy researcher or any genealogy expert that doesn't even have their own genealogy brick walls. We are a tenacious lot, that's for sure, and we do keep chipping away at those brick walls, and hopefully one day we will be able to solve those family history mysteries that are in our family tree and be able to share them with the rest of the family. Now, in addition to getting to ask if I have brick walls, then people want to know, how do I actually break through those brick walls? Or what do I do? What's the first thing I do when it comes to trying to break through those genealogy brick walls? And one of the first things that I do, and I do this actually on a regular basis, is I will create a timeline for everything that I know about that ancestor. I take a step back. I try to let go of all of my preconceived notions about what I know and what I think I know, and I just start over. And I will reanalyze the documents. I will recreate a timeline and see if something else will jump out at me. Because as I progress as a researcher, as you progress as a researcher, and get some more experience under my belt, maybe I've read a book on Irish immigrant women who come over, and maybe I picked up some ideas that I might want to consider putting in my timeline or consider researching out. So I'm different. I have new information, and I want to make sure that I'm evaluating the information I already have in the new light, with a new eye. So what do? I actually just start over, and I create that timeline, and I reanalyze what I have, and then I'll brainstorm theories. And I will let any theory out there, any crazy harebrained idea that I have on my ancestor, I will write it down, because I never know when one of them might actually spark something for a research plan. So that's what I do when I come up to that brick wall ancestor. And again, sometimes because there's so much work involved in breaking down a brick wall, I recognize that once I'm there. So one of the questions I get is, well, if you have brick wall ancestors, how do you actually tackle brick wall ancestors? And well, I do that. I do two things when it comes to trying to tackle that brick wall ancestor. I start over, basically. I let go of all preconceived notions that I think I know about that ancestor, that I actually know about them or think I know about them. I pull out all of the documents again, and I kind of start from beginning by reevaluating everything with a new eye, because I have a more practiced eye when it comes to research. I have more genealogy experience now. The next thing that I'll do is then I create a timeline. Now, I personally love just paper and pencil and just go to town. Absolutely, you can do this online. I have done it online, but sometimes because I like techie things on the computer, I get too tied up in the techie part of it when I really need to be focusing on the data for my ancestor. So I find just a piece of paper and a pencil, sometimes you can use colored pencils if you're feeling fancy, will suffice and actually be more beneficial to my research. So that's what I do when I hit that brick wall ancestor. And to be honest, here's a tip. I actually might do it several times for the same ancestor over a period of years. If you'd like to learn more about genealogy resources and how to find your ancestors, be sure and watch this next video that's on your screen now.